done forgot how to lead a meeting. We haven't met since November. Is that right? Yeah. I'd like to welcome everybody today. We do have a quorum. Appreciate the Transportation Coordinating Committee for letting us borrow some time, Josh. Appreciate that. So we've got a full house here today. Move on to our business, and in your package, you got your minutes. I'll take a motion to approve. Got a motion? Need a second? Got a second? Any questions? Not all in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? I want to recognize Ray Render, John Rose's office. You got any wisdom from Washington today, Ray?
Can y'all have some I can send up there? But he get that budget done so we can start some projects. Good to be back with you.
Moving on. This time I like to open the floor to public comments. Is anybody here that'd like to make a comment to the Transportation Policy Board? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3A on the carbon reduction program. I'm going to introduce Daniel, which is our senior transportation planner. Daniel.
All right, thank you, Chair. So I'll give you guys an overview of this program. You may remember from our phase 1 call for projects back in September of last year. Carbon reduction program is a new program through the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as it's also called, to reduce transportation emissions. About 6.4 billion available nationwide, 139 million available statewide in Tennessee. And then in terms of our urbanized areas, about 14.6 million available suballocated to the Nashville Davidson urbanized area, 2.2 million to the Murfreesboro, and then for our newly designated Spring Hill urbanized area, about 483,000. In terms of eligible projects, pretty similar to the CMAQ fund program, which you might be familiar with. ITS, electrification upgrades, public transit, basically any project that can reduce carbon emissions from the transportation sector. In terms of requirements, it requires about a 20% non-federal match. There are some projects that are eligible for 100%, ITS being one of them. And then it has to be obligated within 4 years of the apportionment, depending on the fiscal year. For our phases, just as a reminder, there was about 5.3 million that was awarded through phase 1. The application period opened in August, closed in September. We announced the awards and amended them into the TIP at the September meeting of this body. For phase 2, we took a little bit of a different approach. So phase 1 was mainly based on cost overruns for existing projects, but in phase 2, we opened that up to new projects. And we're proposing about 11.2 million to be awarded through phase 2 of that grant program. That application period opened in September and then closed in November. And then at this meeting, we'll be announcing the awards. Again, all projects have to demonstrate a reduction in carbon emissions. They have to be consistent with our regional transportation plan. We favored existing projects over new projects to make sure that any existing projects in our TIP, this allowed them to be completed. And then again, the obligation deadline, as well as availability of required non-federal matching funds. So these were the applicants of phase 2. Total is about 27.5 million. That was requested. Obviously, that's more than we had for this program. So we had to do evaluation to figure out what we could fund. And then here are our proposed awards. So you'll see there are 7 proposed awards. I'll kick it over to Shay Northfield, our TIP manager, to walk through each award, each proposed award, as well as provide a little bit of detail on exactly what these projects will be doing.
Daniel, good morning, everyone. So the first one we have on our list is Franklin's Murfreesboro Road traffic signal improvements. This adds 280,000 in federal funds, and this project is being reincorporated to fully fund the project. This will improve operations at 13 intersections along Murfreesboro Road. This will reduce carbon emissions from congestion and improving the traffic flow. Next is Lebanon's Intelligent Transportation System. This adds 800,000 in federal funds with a total programmed amount of 3.5 million. This project will further connect the city's signals for remote signal timing and monitoring, and this will also reduce emissions by limiting time of vehicle idling or slowing from signaling and to improve the traffic flow. The next one is Mount Juliet's Intelligent Transportation and Signal Improvements. This adds nearly $1 million in federal funds, with a total programmed amount of about 3.4 million to 13 intersections along Mount Juliet Road. This is a signal improvement project that will improve the flow of traffic and thus reducing fuel consumption, traffic delays, and the idling of pollutants and decreasing carbon emissions. Next is Smyrna's Jefferson Pike intersection improvements. This is a new project that adds 1 million in federal funds to add a left turn lane and complete intersection upgrades to optimize traffic flow, again, reducing traffic delays and the pollutants emitted when idling. Next is Murfreesboro's Memorial Boulevard traffic signal improvements, adds over 1 million in federal funds with 2 million total funds programmed to update 13 signals along Murfreesboro Road with new technology to improve the signal operational efficiency, which will decrease those carbon emissions. Next, we have RTA's regional bus service. This adds about 3.5 million in federal funds for operation of regional commuter bus routes. And having commuter bus routes available expands Tennesseans' sustainable transportation options throughout the region. Finally, we have Connect Downtown. This is a project through Metro Nashville. This is a new project plan for adaptive signal timing to accommodate changing traffic patterns and ease congestion in the downtown area. Improved traffic flow will decrease carbon emissions. And this is adding over $3 million to these traffic signals in Nashville's inner loop.
All right,
And I'll
does
pass it
any-
back.
Anybody got any questions for Daniel? Questions at all? If not, I'll open it back up to the public comment. If there's anybody here who would love to make a comment on this resolution. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion to adopt the funding award recommendations for phase 2 projects. Got a motion by Mayor Moore. Need a second? Calhoun, second is? Second, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of this motion, say aye. You want to oppose? So we'll move to item B. Then the Transportation Improvement Program. Chair recognizes Shay Northfield, GNRC tip coordinator.
So just as a review, the TIP is a short-term work program that covers a 4-year span and lists all regionally significant and federally funded transportation projects within the MPO region. It must be consistent with the regional transportation plan and be fiscally constrained. The current TIP is fiscal years 2023 to 2026 and was adopted in November of 2022 with about $1.7 billion. And an interactive map of the current projects in the TIP is available at gnrc.org/TIP if you would ever like to access that. So as an overview, there are 8 amendments adding about $12 million in federal funds to the TIP. All of the amendments today are a result of the carbon reduction program that we just discussed through the award process. The first 4 are adding funds to existing projects, and then the final 4 there are 3 new projects added to the TIP for the first time. So it would be an amendment to incorporate into the TIP and then add funds to the ones that are listed on the screen. And then there was one project that is reincorporating to the current TIP. And I will pass it back to the chair for any questions.
Any questions? Questions for Shay? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing back up. Is anyone from the public would like to speak on this? Hearing none, I'll move it, asking for a motion to resolution 2401, amending transportation improvement program. A motion, need a second? Got a second. All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that resolution is approved. Item C, I'm gonna ask to introduce Michael Skipper, Ashley Glasscock. Michael's gonna represent us on the roadway safety targets.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience as we squeeze two groups in to this room, but it's good to have you at our offices here at the Greater Nashville Regional Council. Here in a minute, I'm going to introduce one of our brilliant senior research analysts, Ashley Glasscock, to introduce to you the proposed annual target for roadway safety performance measures. As many of you in the room know, each January and February, we ask the Transportation Policy Board to take action on setting an annual safety performance measure in order to comply with federal performance-based planning requirements. What's really unique about our region is that we have the option of supporting the statewide target for roadway safety performance or choosing to be a little bit more ambitious in our goal setting and adopting our own targets. And it's been our history since we adopted the Regional Transportation Plan in 2021 to set our own regional targets for roadway safety performance measures. So in a little bit, I'll turn it over to Ashley, who will share with you the numbers that we've identified for those targets in 2024. She spends a lot of her time with the rest of our staff and the staff at the participating jurisdictions of the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Area, state federal agencies, in the weeds on this data, try to understand crash trends, what's contributing to crashes, what's contributing to the increase in serious injuries and fatalities. We can slice and dice the data any way you like to be able to try to understand better what's happening across the region, what the appropriate countermeasures could be to address increasing roadway safety concerns. But before I introduce her, I wanted to zoom out a little bit and just remind folks how we got to where we are in terms of setting our own regional target. It's easy to get lost in the crash data. It's important to zoom out, I think, occasionally, and remind ourselves that 2021, 42,939 people died on America's roadways. Leading cause of death for teenagers that year, and in many years, it's the leading cause of death. And in the preceding decade, 2011 through 2020, more than 370,000 Americans died on the roadways as a result of traffic crashes. So that's sort of a reminder of the significance of this nationally. And 2021 was near the high watermark for our country in terms of lives lost on the roadways. In Tennessee, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a little bit, whereas we rank 16th nationally in terms of population, we are the 8th highest in terms of absolute traffic fatalities. There are 7 states with more people, but with fewer traffic fatalities. And so I'm going to go through, sort of compare Tennessee to those other 7 states, give you a sense of the idea here that just because you have a lot of people or you are a growing state, it doesn't mean that you can't reduce fatalities on the roadways. A little bit about the infographic. So you see the 6.97 million people in Tennessee as of 2021, and then the total traffic fatalities that have been recorded from crashes in 2021 at 1327. Up above the state boundary is the state's population ranking nationally, and then that 8 represents the traffic fatalities ranking nationally, and the higher you are in that ranking, the worse the condition is. And so I want to point out those numbers as I begin to flip through and compare ourselves to the other states that have more people living in them with fewer traffic fatalities. I think this list probably surprised many people in the room. So first up is Massachusetts, slightly more people than Tennessee, but significantly less traffic fatalities on the roadways. Massachusetts ranks 15th nationally in terms of population, but 32nd nationally in terms of traffic fatalities. Next up is Arizona with about 500,000, about 250,000 more people than Tennessee, and 1180 in terms of traffic fatalities. Washington State has more people, fewer traffic fatalities. Same with Virginia, 8.66 million people, 973 traffic fatalities in 2021. New Jersey, 9.27 million people, less than 700 traffic fatalities compared to our 1327 in 2021. Michigan, more than 10 million people, less traffic fatalities than Tennessee with less than 7 million people living in it. And then finally, New York with close to 20 million people with fewer traffic fatalities than the state of Tennessee. So I point this out because it's really easy when we talk about roadway safety performance targets to think that we can't reduce fatalities because we live in a growing state, right? And I'll talk about some of the other metrics that we track along with our crash data, particularly related to fatalities, serious injuries for motorists, but also for pedestrians. Traffic fatalities for motorists tend to be disproportionately placed to more rural areas as speeding increases, as emergency response is slower, as roadway engineering may be a little bit less sophisticated because of the lack of infrastructure, whereas pedestrian and bicycle crashes and the injuries and fatalities that result from that tend to be disproportionately located in urban areas where you have a lot more activity, but not yet necessarily the mature infrastructure to facilitate the multimodal nature of the community. This is a look at population and traffic fatalities since 1994. As reported by the FARS database. Tennessee is the light blue line, the nation is the dark blue line. And you can see, even though there are fluctuations in the number of fatalities per year per capita, one thing that is really obvious is that Tennessee stays above the nation for the entire duration of this timeline. In fact, in 2021, Tennessee was 47% higher than the national average for traffic fatalities per capita. And I think that's a really motivating factor as we begin to consider the things that we can do through the MPO to fund investments that improve safety, but what you all can do as local leaders to build infrastructure, educate your citizens about roadway safety laws, but also help invest in local law enforcement for patrolling for the enforcement side of this. And we can talk more about countermeasures later in the presentation, but a few more statistics before I turn it over to Ashley. This is looking at miles traveled and traffic fatalities. There's a sense that there's a correlation between the amount of traveling we do and the resulting fatalities. And to some extent, that's true, although I don't think that there is a causal relationship between those two variables. But in the case of miles traveled and traffic fatalities, Tennessee trended 18% higher than the national average fatalities per VMT in 2021. So this is 21 data. That's the most complete national data set for fatalities, but it also significantly happened to be the year that this body adopted the last major update to the Regional Transportation Plan, which programs anticipated federal funds, state dollars, and local matching funds through the year 2045. So 2021 through 2045, we have a fiscally constrained plan that represents about $10.5 billion worth of investments across Middle Tennessee into its transportation system. The decisions in that plan were based on trying to accomplish one of six or more than one of six goals. Improving roadway safety was one of those goals, along with congestion management, maintaining a state of good repair for our transportation system, supporting economic development, and a few other goals. But importantly, though, this body, on the advice of staff and the Transportation Coordinating Committee, weighted roadway safety as the top priority among all those goals. So as we were evaluating projects that were competing for anticipated federal dollars through the planning process, those that were shown to be positioning ourselves for safer roads were more likely to be funded than those projects that were not. So it was the top priority of the public policy that was set by the Regional Transportation Plan in 2021. It came along with 4 objectives that align fairly well to the performance-based planning requirements that we have to meet as a MPO and as a state for federal regulations. Reducing crashes and incidents, reducing traffic fatalities and serious injuries, and focusing on pedestrian and bicycle safety. A long-term target was set with the Regional Transportation Plan that is guiding our annual performance setting, target setting process. And so the numbers that Ashley are going to present are a result of the fact that in 2021, what this body said was that we want to see a minimum of an average annual reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries by 1% per year out to the year 2045. So that's the general framework for how we go about setting our annual targets. The goal is to make sure that we're staying on that goal line over time. And the penalty is, sometimes we get concerned about setting targets for ourselves within the context of federal requirements, because if we don't reach those targets, there might be some sort of penalty. But the penalty is simply that funding that is dedicated for safety improvements can't be flexed to solve other problems. It has to be focused on providing those safety improvements, right? So that's the penalty. I think we could all agree that's not much of a penalty at all. The purpose of target setting is to make sure that we are driving towards a goal that we can feel good about in terms of improving roadway safety. A couple other myths that we like to debunk along the way. The idea of reducing fatalities and serious injuries, not just the rates, but the actual absolute numbers. In a growing state, again, with increased amounts of driving and licensed drivers, we like to think, well, that's not possible because the number of fatalities and serious injuries are directly correlated to those figures. This is for the state of Tennessee. That really erratic line is traffic fatalities. And the three really steady lines are growth in people, licensed drivers and registered motor vehicles. So as those are all trending up pretty consistently, the number of fatalities tends to be fairly erratic because there's a lot more going into it than just our growth in people, drivers, and vehicles. All right, so just a reminder there. And then this is our growth and VMT as a state compared to the annual fatalities over time. So the next few slides, as I wrap up my part, they're all just words I'm going to read to you, but I think they're really important words here, right? In 2021, the region was on pace to see more than 10,185 people die from traffic crashes on Middle Tennessee roads through 2045. That was where we were headed when we had presented to you the goal for safety. So our target of 1% average annual reduction from 2021 levels to 2045 over that 25-year period, achieving that reduction would have saved or could save upwards of 5,900 people on area roadways. That was the goal that we set for ourselves. Unfortunately, the last 3 years have not gone in our favor in terms of hitting that target. Through the first 3 years of the plan's horizon, we are now on pace to see 770 additional people die on top of the 10,185 that we had estimated to be our trajectory back in 2021. So we're going in the opposite direction when it comes to roadway traffic fatalities. To stay on track, so if we want to preserve that reduction in overall fatalities through the year 2045, we would have to average no more than 157 traffic fatalities per year, which is well above our recent actuals and still well above the target that we're going to present to you this morning that keeps us on that original goal line that was first adopted in 2021. So before, again, I turn it over to Ashley, I think it's really important to make sure you're all aware of the great access to data and mapping that's available through our website and the consulting that our staff can do for you in terms of assessing your local conditions and what you can do about this. Crash data dashboards are available at gnrc.org/dashboards. And then there's just a significant amount of work that Ashley and Max and the planning team have done to try to understand what's happening at a very granular level to be able to get these numbers in check over the longer term. So with that, I'll introduce Ashley Glasscock to present to you the annual targets for 2024. And we will be seeking action on these targets so we can get them submitted to TDOT and the Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administrations. And these come to you with the endorsement of the Transportation Coordinating Committee. So I want to thank Chair Josh Sudith for his work with that group, bringing you this recommendation this morning.
First graph that I'm showing you is just an example using fatalities. We have the same information for all performance measures that we do set. I just want to give you an example of the one. So what you're seeing in gray, you're seeing historic annual fatalities. That was the number of people that died in each of those individual years. Then you're also seeing the base year, which is what we used to set our original scenario to take that 1% annual reduction, like Michael had just mentioned, to get us on that goal of having fatalities under 152 by 2045. And in order to do that, 2024's target needs to keep fatalities under 187 at the least to keep us on that goal. If you go to the next slide, this is a table just to summarize the targets that we're setting for all performance measures. So as you can see, for the number of fatalities for 2021, we started off with 233 people. Needing to keep us on that goal line, we have to have an annual target for 2024 of 187 fatalities. For fatality rate, we need to have less than 0.8 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. For number of seriously injured, we need to have less than 1,284 people seriously injured to keep us on that goal line. As far as serious injury rate, we need to keep it under 5.48 serious injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And then when we look at number of non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries, we need to keep that number below 170 in order to keep us on our goal line by 2045. Pass it back off to Michael.
Thank you, Ashley.
Hey, thank you, Ashley, and thanks, Michael. That's a lot of data and pretty sobering fact, isn't it? Does anybody got any questions for Michael and them? Mayor Callis?
Do you have a chart that shows all 95 counties, the number of fatalities per county, the number of fatalities that are pedestrian, non-motorist related? Do we have a chart of that? It shows all that. I'd love to see that in totality to the state.
I have the information available that we can distribute to you. It's just not in this slide deck, but we do have that information.
Mayor?
Michael, I guess a couple of things caught my eye on looking at the trends. It seemed like trend line pre-COVID pretty sharply down, like we were moving in the right direction, not just Tennessee, but stepping back up to national trends. And it seems like there's been an uptick both here and elsewhere. Is there anything in the data that, again, you've shown that it isn't just growth that's leading to fatalities? Are there other things that are known factors in the increase in risk there?
The most obvious thing that sticks out is travel speeds increasing during the pandemic, and those behaviors sort of set in, and speed kills. The faster you go, the more likely you are to be seriously injured or killed in a traffic accident if it should occur along your way. So that's the most obvious thing. Another thing that I think we're looking into is trying to quantify the impact that, a lot of this is, some of this is engineering, some of it is education, a lot of it is enforcement, and local government and state investment and patrol officers, I know has become a significant issue. So speeding, distracted driving from mobile phone use in the car. And those things do contribute to the likelihood you're going to be in a crash or be seriously injured or worse. But it doesn't mean just because those are behavioral risks that we can't do more on the engineering side to prepare for that, right? If you have a roadway that's poorly striped, bad lighting, bad signage, bad safety design, safety focused design, distracted drivers and those that are speeding are more likely to mess up in those conditions than they would in a roadway or on a transportation system that is properly designed. So, there are the 4 E's of safety planning that we are all aware of: engineering, education, enforcement, and emergency response, which in a lot of ways contributes to what's happening in the rural areas just because of the distances between and the length of the service times to respond to those conditions. But distracted driving, speeding are the things that are easy to spot in the data, but I think there's a lot more to it that we can pull from the information.
I think the follow-up question to me is, as we look at, I know that this program that we just approved for CRPG is not itself focused on safety, but I know, for instance, Nashville's application, we think that Connect Downtown element is not just about traffic flow and movement, but it has a safety element to it. In a teaching the test framework, right? I think these targets are appropriate, but I want to make sure we can also draw lines, not just for safety focused things, but even when we do things like this, are we able to point to corollaries to what we're doing to try to hit these targets?
Yes, sir. And, I'd like to, I'm glad you point out the use of the CRP funds to improve safety. The amount of money in our transportation improvement program that is dedicated by regulation or policy to safety is very small. And so it's on us to make every project a safety improvement, and that's possible, right? Even in locations without high crashes, you can be designing and implementing improvements that help provide safe traveling conditions for motorists and pedestrians and cyclists.
I guess what I'm asking though is, going forward, will we be able to, will GNRC have the capacity to show even on those sort of non-safety projects, we think that these things might be helping bend that curve.
Sort of like pre-post improvement to make sure that, yeah, I think that's something we'd love to work with TDOT on, is to try to understand the before and the after conditions related to the investments that we're making, so we can quantify essentially the ROI on certain types of investments to improve safety. And safety is just one of the performance measures that we track. We're also looking at roadway congestion, the state of good repair, and a lot of other measures. So in the end, it is a balancing act amongst some of those all those objectives, sometimes which are compete with each other, to make sure that we are keeping our eye on the big picture. But clearly, this policy board and the community engagement that we do put safety at the top of the list in terms of what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I just want to recognize you, your staff, for the extra effort it does take, because you are the only MPO that's adopting their own targets. So I just want to recognize it again. A very good information you put together, and obviously the extra effort that it does take to adopt your own. So I want to recognize you for that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, just speaking for the chair, I see more people on bicycles now, more people walking, running. We've got a lot of people using our roads. I think everybody in this room's probably hit a deer. You know, so it's just a lot going on. We need to be more aware of what, the speeds we're doing. It's just, Michael, this was a good presentation. Josh, I appreciate your committee for what they've done on this. Yeah. Anybody else got a question? Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what the other comments are, but can you drill down into this data? There are some things that this board doesn't have influence over, such as drinking and driving, alcohol, seat belts, things like that. Does that data give you that? I know all of the police reports have that information.
Yes, sir. Yeah, in fact, we're happy to help you mine that data for your own community, but even the data that we packaged online, you can drill into the causes for the accident. And it is true that it's not this policy board's sole responsibility to get these numbers down, but we can contribute to that trend. And the other thing, and what's really interesting when you look at the Transportation Policy Board, we're all here wearing our transportation programming hat, essentially. But we all, many of you who are elected officials at the local and state level, have responsibilities beyond the transportation infrastructure, right? You're contributing to conversations about local law enforcement and the nature of the education that you're doing in the communities to make sure people don't put themselves in harm's way. But yes, sir, it would be wrong and misguided to say that everything that we're seeing on the screen, that is the sobering message that the chair mentioned, can be solved through better engineering and better roads. But when 43,000 people in 2021, 370,000 Americans over the decade preceding are dying trying to get from point A to point B. It may not be the drunk driver who's the one injured. It could be the innocent bystander. It is something that I think it's important for us to all take stock in what we're doing individually through the different hats that we wear to be able to address the issue.
Mayor Moore.
I'd be interested in seeing county breakdown and city breakdown, in particular emphasis also on bike ped. And great report. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, great.
And great. It just shows how important this data collection is and the importance of GNRC and the great work that your data people are doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ashley. And hey, I appreciate your comment. Appreciate it. Anybody got a question? Go ahead.
I did have a question related to speeding enforcement. And Mr. Skipper, you touched on that because we do have difficult conversations at the local level about funding or the level of enforcement or the appropriateness of that, automated or not enabled at the state level, automated enforcement outside of school zones, as I understand it. But if we kind of elevate to the top that speed kills, I wonder if we can assess by county or at the local level if kind of how enforcement is or is not a factor. It's one of myriad factors, but I feel like it's a difficult conversation for us to have at the local level sometimes because of some of the concerns around surveillance and LPRs and other things. I mean, it's a difficult conversation, but I feel like at our local level, in my 8 years of service, I can see enforcement, speeding enforcement has gone through the floor. It seems like we don't do it much anymore. And so I'm interested to understand, do other counties do that more? And is that a factor? Just sort of bringing that back into the conversation in a way that's data-based to, and so I don't know if that's something that we can kind of bring to bear in this fatality space, or if y'all have data around that, Mr. Skipper.
No, I mean, we'd be very excited to find that relationship that exists. And, you know, we will rely on the local governments in the state to provide the information necessary. But I think that is a question that needs to be answered in terms of speeding, law enforcement, some of the issues that Mayor Anderson mentioned. It is important to get in there and see what the greatest contributors are so that we can focus our limited resources in the right area. And what seems like an easy solution to address roadway safety is maybe a difficult thing to implement that has unintended consequences elsewhere. And so that's the difficulty of politics. And while we're all very proud of y'all's individual decisions to run for office, is to make this decision. So thank you for the question, and we'll be happy to look into that.
Good question. Let me just comment. You know, the governor's has upped the salary of the state troopers to get more state troopers on the road. And I've noticed in Robson County, we do have more. But in the same time, as a county mayor, and I've talked to some city mayors, we've had to up the salaries of our deputies to get more deputies on the road because everybody was short. You know, it's a problem that can be fixed with money, but that's not very popular when you're reaching in people's pockets. But that is probably the biggest answer is money put behind law enforcement. It's not, when I get a lot of backlash over radar and all that, I just tell them that's our job. That's our job. Yeah. But I think any mayor here will tell you it's about money, Mayor Callis.
It is. And one of the things, even in the governor's speech the other night, and we all was interested in the list he puts out, right? Where's some focus of spending? One of the things we've been asking for is to restore the historical separation on the local option sales tax, so that all of our communities could receive more money based on the sales that are generated in our communities. Well, due to the franchise and excise situation that's going on in the state, that money is getting directed there in case there's an issue. Once again, we're left out. For a small community like the city of Portland, we need that money to hire police and fire. We would love to institute just a traffic division just for our little community. We have state routes 109, 52, 31W, and 76 in a small community, not counting I-65, which we all know that we've had meetings with that said we're not going to enforce traffic during rush hour on the interstate, because if that happens, then the backup on the traffic gets worse. So people get carte blanche to drive 95. Well over 100, it's been documented to see that. So I don't know what the real answer for everything is, but getting down and drilling down where our real issues are, Roger's talking about. And, you know, even the things as simple as when we design roadways, that's maybe something that we get off into. Delivery points on the side, people walk out in front of a delivery truck, they come out into traffic. Many people don't look when they cross the road and they're looking on their phone or whatever. That's an issue that the average driver can't control because you stepped out in a non-walk crossing zone. So there are a few things I think we can do, but if we had more money to do more traffic enforcement, I think all of us sitting here that operate a community would say we could definitely use that, but that's beyond the things that we control, as Michael said. So
You know, I'd like to say, as a mayor and, you know, just a citizen, I can't believe how people drive through construction zones. Very dangerous, very dangerous. Those people out there risking their lives to work on the road. And I've seen state troopers out there trying to help, but when you pull one over, everybody else is still, you know, you're just getting one. That's a problem too, construction zones. It really is.
I may just to circle back on that. I think then, you know, from a database perspective, if you're speaking about kind of the cost and, you know, sort of the
Human life, I understand.
and the, you know, the bodies to kind of enforce with the radar and so forth. That's why I'm interested from a policy perspective, to get the conversation to, kind of automated enforcement. And so, you know, Mayor, you spoke to construction zones, right? So we have a little area there in school zones where we do some automated enforcement, maybe construction zones, start to kind of show the data on that. Because if we look at the investments that the state is making, and if safety is a priority, and so, you know, we're expanding roadways, making them wider, you know, choice lanes, et cetera. But I think if we could, from a policy perspective, elevate the conversation around automated enforcement, because, you know, I-24 smart corridor, all that goes into that. But why not to automated enforcement? Because I would say fiscally, right, that's probably a good place to be. I know it's a difficult conversation for people, and this state tried to advance that conversation before, and there was quite a bit of backlash. But I think given the safety trends, and I would say from our constituency, it just seems to be a convergence. What Mayor O'Connell pointed to, and you spoke to Mr. Skipper about, you know, folks are on their phones. They've kind of baked in a little bit more speeding around the pandemic, and then I would presume the most popular vehicle in our state is, you know, the F-150, right? High fronted, so vehicular design, speed, distraction, it's all converging. And so I really think maybe it's time to kind of start to talk about automated enforcement again. And I would just put that out there respectfully.
Thank you. Anybody else got a question or comment? Hey, that was a good discussion. Let's get back to, if not, I'm open public hearing again. Does anyone from the public like to make a comment on Michael's report? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adopt this resolution 2402, setting safety targets for 2024. Got a motion for Rogers Anderson. Need a second. Got a second. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Surely not. That motion passes. Thank y'all. That was good discussion. Okay, we're going to skip informational items. We don't have no information, but go to our regular reports. And I'm going to recognize Melanie Murphy, federal report.
Everyone. This conversation actually leads perfectly into what we want to chat with y'all about. I know a lot of y'all are aware about the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. Coming back on the street really, really soon this month, we're expecting to get another funding opportunity released. We wanted to provide a little bit more guidance on that program, what y'all can fund with it, you know, what kind of opportunity there is. Go to the next slide. So like I said, the next round is anticipated to go out this month. I kind of heard this week, but should be coming very, very soon. Just as a reminder that funds two types of grants: planning and demonstration grants and implementation grants. Next slide. So the planning and demonstration grants, I know a lot of folks have taken advantage of that particularly to develop a safety action plan. So I think was what most folks have gone towards, because it is a requirement to have that in place before you can go for implementation grants. But then I also wanted to point out that this grant can also fund supplemental planning and demonstration activities. And really the crux here is that those are used to inform the development of a new or an existing action plan. So you just have to show that there's some sort of, you know, connection between these two activities, that you're using those to develop your action plan. Next slide. So just wanted to point out a little bit on, you know, when we're talking about supplemental action plan activities, like what kind of activities we're really talking about. So it could be, you know, a topical safety subplan. So let's say you're doing a speed management plan, looking at vulnerable road users, an ADA's transition plan, et cetera, et cetera. You could do a road safety audit. You could do some additional safety analysis or expand your data collection efforts, you know, maybe beyond an action plan that you already have or one that you're working on. Some equity assessments, some additional engagement with stakeholders. Lots of things you could do to really supplement that action plan. And we do actually have, I think Williamson County is the only one that I'm aware of that is doing a supplement action plan, supplement planning activity to do some greenway study. Next slide. So demonstration activities, we really want to make sure we highlight these. These are also eligible through that first kind of funding category. So kind of the key thing to remember is that it's a temporary safety improvement. So temporary being the main kind of keyword here. Which, you're really trying to, again, inform your action plan by kind of testing out that proposed project and seeing, how can that help us determine our future scope. Eligible activities must you must measure potential benefits through data collection and evaluation. So kind of doing a pre and post demonstration, kind of getting those results. And again, to inform that action plan. And they kind of really highlighted that you should be able to have that demonstration activity in place within 18 months of you getting the grant or the grant agreement being in place. Next slide. So providing a couple of examples here on what kind of activities are eligible. Don't limit yourself to these. Again, as long as you can kind of show it's a temporary activity that has a safety benefit that will be used to inform your action plan. It's kind of wide open, but here's kind of some examples of what they're pointing to of what can be eligible as a demonstration grant. So using quick build strategies, low cost temporary materials to, kind of that will have a safety impact. So some examples here are doing planners, temporary speed bumps, a temporary traffic circle, just kind of testing that out, what that would do to your community. And then also maybe some, delineators, plastic posts to kind of do some impermanent roadway design changes. Next slide. MUTCD engineering studies. So you can kind of further see, how you can apply the MUTCD. There's a list of, options here. I kind of just put everything that they put out there on this for y'all to reference. But, testing out setting safe speed limits, variable speed limits, evaluating warrants for traffic signals, doing some mid-block crossway installations, bike lane treatments, high visibility crosswalk markings. So again, just don't focus on everything on this list, but just to kind of show what kind of activities are eligible. Next slide. Behavioral operational activities. I think this really touches on a lot of the conversation that was already had just now. Piloting a program for behavioral operational activities that include at least one element of the safe system approach, which you can see here. So it's kind of 5 elements: safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, post-crash care, and safe road users. So you can kind of see FWA understands that it's not just, the roadway system that is having an impact on this, but it's kind of everyone at the table trying to, make our roads a lot safer. So a couple of things on here, that again, examples of what would be eligible, testing out an education campaign to regarding distracted driving, promoting, the use of seatbelts, pop-up safety demonstration, again, using those kind of temporary materials, a pilot testing a rideshare or an alternative transportation program in an area that has high impaired driving or crashes or fatalities, or trial changes to test how emergency medical response to crashes. So again, showing you that you can really, it's not just about roadway improvements. It's kind of touching on any of these of the safe system approach. It can be eligible for that demonstration activity category. Next slide. And then one more, you could do like a pilot program testing out some new technology that have a safety benefit. You'd want it to be commercially available, but your community hasn't adopted it yet. So a couple of examples here, variable speed limits, speed safety cameras, adaptive signal timing, signal warnings for wrong way driving. You could do for work zones. There's some technology for that to alert drivers work zone, vehicle and infrastructure technology. So lots of choices here. Remember, this is not exhaustive, but we're just trying to show you all the kind of things that are eligible. Next slide. And then implementation grants. These are really meant to actually fund the projects and strategies that your action plan identified of how you can improve roadway safety in your community. You have to have an eligible action plan to get implementation grant funding. So, examples here include applying low-cost roadway safety treatments, system-wide, transforming a roadway corridor that's in a high-injury network to a complete street, supporting development of bikeway networks, carrying out speed management strategies. So again, there's like a huge list of things here. These are all just examples of types of things that are eligible for these kinds of grants. Next slide. And then just some key things that I wanted to point out for y'all. So for FY24, there's $650 million available nationwide for planning and demonstration grants. So I think the way the program is set up, it's usually $1 billion a year, 400 million going to planning and demonstration, 600 million to implementation. But in past years, they haven't spent everything in the planning, so that bucket just keeps getting bigger and bigger because they still have some left over. So that's why this number is so high for FY '24. And FY '22 and '23, everyone that had eligible project that was a planning or demonstration project got awarded. That should be a big kind of, you know, motivator to maybe go for this funding pot. The narrative for the planning demonstration activity is pretty brief. It's pretty, I don't want to say easy per se, but it's not maybe as complicated as maybe going for another grant opportunity. You don't have to know the exact location of your demonstration project at that phase of you just writing the application. Implementation grants can also include supplemental planning and demonstration activities. So that can also be a portion of your implementation grant if you're going to go for one of those. And then applicants can request up to $10 million for planning and demonstration activities. And that can be, if you're going for a planning and demonstration grant, or if you're going for an implementation grant, a portion of that can be $10 million in planning and demonstration activities. I think I'll have a slide of just some, of course, want to recognize the folks in our area that have, or in this area that have gotten a planning demonstration grant or implementation grant, kind of an exhaustive list here so far. So like I said, I think there's been lots of success here in the area to get this funding to the area, which has been really great. And really would encourage y'all to consider going for more of it in the next round of SS4A. Next slide. And then here's just some resources on, you know, where you kind of find more information. As soon as that award is out, we'll make sure to get it to GNRC staff to send out to everyone. That's it. Any questions on that?
Melanie.
Just want to reiterate a couple things that Melanie said. First of all, thank you for bringing this information to the body. But if your community is looking through this grant and you have questions, we spend a lot of time as staff looking through the notice of funding opportunities, and Melanie's team spends a lot of time doing the same, has access to any resources at Federal Highway that might be able to help you. So even if you're not sure exactly what you want to apply for, those planning and demonstration grants clearly are a great opportunity. So feel free to reach out to us. We have, you know, all the data resources you might need. Awesome data team, as you have seen in the previous presentation. So please reach out to us if you're at all struggling with what to apply for.
Just a quick, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. You said it opens in February. Do you know how long the submission period will be open for? Or is it typical?
I'm not totally sure. I think I can't think off the top of my head how long it is. I don't want to say the wrong number.
I was like, yeah, I was looking on the website. I don't see how long it's typically open for when the submittals are due.
I can try to pull up the last NOFO if you give me just a minute.
Kelsey, you want to go ahead?
Maybe Melanie or Daniel could answer. One of the things we brought up in the other portion, looking at the study about the fatalities, is roads that it's hard to identify, especially if it's inclement weather, raining, something. What about this grant to apply? A lot of our rural roads have no striping. If they have a stripe, it's maybe one in the center. Most of them don't have stripes on the outside. They're not reflective. They've long since worn off. Is this something that's applicable to where we can get out and it'll pay for striping of rural roads and those things?
I think a lot of the county level safety action plans have been very focused on rural roads, since that's, you know, what they're mainly in control of. So I would think that is eligible and would probably encourage you to.
Yeah, I think that would be eligible.
We have a lot of city roads as well that just are, you know, a lot of smaller communities may not afford to be able to say, hey, we're going to stripe it. Maybe it's the center. We don't do the outside. Sometimes even subdivisions on the inside. You'll see a lot of subdivisions with no stripes on the inner roads inside of it. It's just part of the cost effectiveness that gets done. So thank you for that information. We can stripe them. Maybe that'll go toward your other portion. So.
Mayor Anderson.
Melanie, thank you. One of the requests that I would have when you talk to the folks in Washington is extend the deadline that we can expend that money. We're seeing already, and I'm sure you're hearing about it, just in some ARPA funding. And I think all of the elected officials here was echo this. When you're trying to implement some of these things, such as buying equipment, it's taken us 4 years now to get ambulances. we can have that money committed to it, but we're gonna wind up having to cancel the order if we don't get it in by a certain deadline to send the money back to Washington. And there either has to be an extension of time, and maybe Michael can help us write that letter as a region. It's also for transportation equipment. You haven't got enough workers. You've got all these projects going on. And oh, by the way, you can't get the equipment to do the job. So you got to hire maintenance. And so we're seeing that all over our area. So if you wouldn't mind, just be mindful of the fact that when you put us on these 18 and 24 months, that sounds like a long time. But at the end of the day, we're kind of held hostage by the manufacturing company. And there's so many of us wanting this same equipment, whatever that equipment is.
In the legislation, I don't know. I mean, some of those deadlines are in the legislation. So, I mean, I need to take that back and say, hey,
I think you could probably take a nose count around this table. If anybody's trying to figure out how to spend ARPA funds, it's not that they're not trying to spend it. They can't get it. Yeah, it's a supply chain issue.
let's throw $11 trillion in the economy and, oh, we're running out of stuff. But I hear you.
don't think I'm the only
I
one.
hear you. No. Everybody on this table would say that. I will take that back and say, are there some extensions? But
And of course, I would never pass up an opportunity to give the EPA a slap in the face. The plastic strips you're talking about on the outside of you can't get it. You cannot get that, and you can't put out paint because it'll wash off, or you'll put salt on it, it'll take it out. So some of these suggestions that the feds are putting down, they need to come out in the communities and see how they're just not applicable to a lot of the communities we have anymore. Now I'm saying that we were able to get quite a bit of money in Williamson County for some planning, but we also know that you got to be practical.
To, what you can do in your community. Yeah, definitely. I'll take note.
Thank you, Mayor. Everybody here's probably waiting on the ambulance. I know we are. That's just a bad situation.
So, Mr. Chair, before we move on from this, though, I do want to reiterate Daniel's offer to provide support to local applications, either in ideation or trying to figure out if something is realistic in terms of being able to deliver by deadlines or just to strengthen your application. I'd also encourage this body, and we'll work with the Transportation Coordinating Committee on the potential for a regional application, whether it's for data collection to help with our analysis or more work in the policy arena. When y'all are working together on these more policy, political type issues, tend to have a little bit more success. To have that sort of peer group with you, supporting the cause. So we'll work with Josh and the committee to see if we can identify some opportunities for a regional application as well.
And we did check the last round was open for 90 days. 90 days, yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Mark. Okay, if anybody else got a question? If not, we'll move on to the TDOT report. And I'm going to introduce Beth Besserby. Yeah, late. I've been practicing that since November. Man, you got something. Hey, you favor Matt. I didn't see nobody else in this.
We're going to, I think we're going to.
Who we gonna look at?
Stacy or Sean.
All right, Stacy and Sean. You look like Matt. Don't you? You think you do?
I'm not.
I'm gonna go to Dollar Store and get some more. All right, go.
We'll hand the presentation over. Here you go.
Did I get the name right?
Serby.
Missouri.
Missouri.
Somebody told me to say Missouri in the last meeting I did. He give me a stink eye. I ain't.
So, first off, still good morning. I'm Sean Armstrong. I'm with, Region 3, the Director of Pre-Construction. So here to give you guys an update on, 10-year plan, Region 3 highlights. And then, before we jump into it, I do want to introduce a few folks. So if y'all know Stacy, Brian Ledford is our Executive Director for Public-Private Partnerships. So he'll be presenting towards the end on choice lanes. They're hiding back there in the back. Joe Deering is our Assistant Chief Engineer for Program Delivery, and wearing a second hat as Interim Assistant Chief for over Operations. Lori Lang is our Assistant Chief of Engineering. And also with us is our Region 3 project management team. Is John Story is our director of project management for Region 3. And I call them the two Brads. Brad Abel and Bradley Martin is our is part of the project management team. And then Miss Rebecca Hammonds is our communications officer for Region. So with that, I'll jump right in. Daniel, next slide, please. I want to make sure this was my first slide in the presentation today that kind of paints a full picture of the statewide winter storm event. Significant stats you see on that screen. So I'm not going to run through them. They kind of tell their own story. But one thing I do want to mention is the department does put aside $26 million that goes towards snow and ice operations when these events occur. The magnitude of this event caused us on our budget hit us at $21 million. It basically started snowing and it just didn't stop. And so our guy,
Where we had winter weather.
so, you know, I want to brag on our crews that are out there. They work 16-hour shifts and then they're off for 8 hours and they're back at it again. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard to get them to stop after 16 hours. They're just dedicated to trying to keep these roads clear. The big thing that humbled me was when I was over at the region, helped serve a lunch one day, and they just, you can tell they're tired and wore out, but it didn't stop them. So I want to brag on them. Sometimes it's just a thankless job that they're out there, but they'll sit there and drive a stretch of the interstate and have to turn back around and do it right back again because it just didn't stop snowing. So we're proud of them, proud of the crews across the state. So I want to just make sure we brag on them in this forum to the GNRC and the MPO here as well. Next slide, Daniel. So jumping into the 10-year plan, on December 18, 2023, we released our first ever 10-year plan. Just the overview of that, we had an influx of $3.3 billion. $300 million went towards our state aid and $3 billion into our project. So the way that was divided across, $750 million went to each region. I tried to fight for a little more in Region 3, but I didn't lose it. But I'll take that $750 million all day long. But as you can see in the graphic in the middle, it went to improved acceleration, rural interstate widenings, urban congestion, and so on throughout. On the $300 million that went into our state aid program, that was 15 times the amount that's typically gone into that program, which is needed to get out to directly to our communities and help fund the projects they need out there. Next slide. So talking about the funding and the breakdown of it, how did the number come about? This is basically just a math problem. So our annual allocation we get from traditional state and federal dollars is $1.2 billion. And you multiply that across 10 years, that gets you $12 billion. Then we had the TMA influx of dollars, 3.3, but I'm gonna take that 300 million out because that is towards that state aid. So that ends up with a complete total of 15 billion to generate this 10-year project plan. Additionally, there's 6 billion on top of this 15 billion that actually going into multimodal transportation assets that we're striving to increase the safety and expand on that transportation technique. This includes, it's not limited to transit, sidewalks and bikeways, rail, parking ride lots, and airport infrastructure. Next slide. So to jump into kind of the methodology of how the plan came about, first and foremost, we did a full recall of the remaining phases that's in the current 3-year plan. So we wanted to make it whole. We're all aware inflation is really killing us on how we budget and do our projects, especially in the transportation side. So it was important to us that we made it whole. We keep pushing those projects forward. It's shown in the 3-year plan in each phase it's shown. Moving to the next column was we wanted to fund all of our statewide programs at their current established levels, plus an additional 3% each year, and then additional dollars to go in our pavement resurfacing program. Third is we allocated funds for dedicated bridge replacement projects, specifically here in Region 3. The major bridge replacement is the Cumberland River Bridge on I-65 on the north side of Nashville. Additional funds also were set aside in the TMA for regions 1, 2, and 3 for urban congestion and choice lanes. Region 4 is slightly different, being that there's a major river crossing there that's in need of a major bridge replacement on I-55. So we call it America's River Crossing. That's leveraging match dollars we have and targeting a discretionary grant with Federal Highway Administration. Lastly, it's really about balancing TMA and federal and state formula funds to maximize the potential partnerships and grants. Next slide. So we had to re-envision our project prioritization process. So we took nearly 1,000 projects that fit in consideration of the TMA funding. And you can see those buckets there on the left that they all fit in, and then measured them against our guiding principles shown in the middle there in that sideways funnel. And that which actually ends up, the outcome defines our desired long-term goals for the delivery of projects for the state. There's 6 categories which include the factors in those buckets of safety, congestion, cost, the state's share of that cost, economic growth, preservation, livability, and sustainability, time to deliver, and the risk for delivery. Basically, the bottom line of this is it's a program that delivers the best scenario for performance, delivery, and cost. All right, next slide. I'm not gonna lie, I like to call this a shot glass slide. So it really shows the marriage between the 10-year project plan and what y'all traditionally seen as a 3-year plan that comes out of the department that gets sent over for General Assembly for consideration. But it really paints a long-term roadmap for how that 10-year plan feeds into the 3-year plan that gets published out there with the governor's budget and General Assembly when they approve it. It really just defines those future projects so our industry partners, our workers, and citizens know what's coming, how they can plan for it coming down the line. Daniel, next slide. This graphic is about the expenditures that we TMA and our traditional state and federal, and how it gets balanced across different regions. The dashed line is that level 750 million we get each that all regions got. Region 3 is larger by population and lane miles, so we do get based on traditional state and federal dollars, we actually get a little bit more than the other regions and hover around that 32-33% of those dollars. Next slide. This is important to show that the TMA dollars, we actually front loaded the 10-year program to spend 85% of that general fund infusion within that first 5 years. There's 93 projects in this 10-year plan. 46 of those 93 projects were advanced either fully or in part by the $3 billion general fund infusion. Next slide. So this is the map that we've looked. No surprise, everybody should have seen this map. It's out there on our website, but I really want to talk about that. What you see here is those 93 projects that are identified for funding at the project level. This is a fiscally constrained 10-year plan, which exceeds even the federal requirements, which is at 4 years. So basically it's a new commitment from TDOT that says what gets started gets finished. This 10-year plan sets the expectations for our Tennesseans, our workers, our industry partners out there. Like I said, they can plan to know what's coming and tool up, gear up. Contractors are aware that these projects are coming down the line and see what they want to target. I do want to note that there are projects that did not get included for funding in the 10-year plan that from the department knows these are important and they're needed projects. It's just the fact we simply can't afford it at this time because the magnitude of the need is sitting around $30 billion, just over $30 billion in today's dollars. The pie chart in the corner represents kind of the breakdown of how these dollars are kind of spread across. So 55% goes to these major projects you see on the map. The 45% goes to our statewide program investments and state of good repair. So those are projects like bridge repair, safety, resurfacing. I like to call them all the other buckets of projects that we continue to push forward. So it might not be shown as a dot or something on the map, but there are projects throughout the state sitting over in that 45% box. That's why the hatching is shown on the map like that. Last thing I want to talk about on this slide is the national average for projects from start to finish hovers around 15 years. Being stewards of the taxpayers' dollars here, we have to be conscious of the fact that we've got to get faster at how we deliver these projects out the door. A lot of that effort's been done based on how we've done some reorganization of the department, project management focus on pushing projects that need to be pushed, and really honing in and focusing our effort on this. We're setting an ambitious goal to where that from the planning to get to construction of a project the goal is to get that done in 5 years. Which actually allows us to free up dollars, take advantage of the inflation that's hitting us right now, and actually get these done quicker, and then see what comes down the line on how it may free up some additional dollars if that's shown in the plan. Next slide. A lot of this is typically what you see, what comes out of the part of the TDOT 3-year plan. So I really showed this graphic to kind of tell the story of, you always see 3 years of projects, the year and the phase those are sitting in. Right now, we are with the 10-year plan, we're committing to say, yes, that phase is funded once it gets to year 1. So if it shows for PE, it's not just funded for PE in that year. We have identified where the next right-of-way dollars are going to land and where the actual construction dollars are going to land for those projects. So we shouldn't see, unless there's some wild card that comes in, we shouldn't see where projects move in and out, and should maintain a fluid movement of those projects moving up to that first year to get those funds, because the 10-year plan has identified what fiscal year that funding is going to land in, and the dollars sitting there for that based on this 15 billion we set for. Real quick, I do want to talk about our delivery over the past few years and brag on the department that we went from like 2021 and prior to kind of us revamping our delivery process, we were hitting around the 46% mark on projects. The advent of project management, the board of the pushers focusing effort on say, these are the projects we are doing. We reached in 2022 a 92.8% delivery on our 3-year plan projects that were identified for funding. And in 2023, we ended up adding bridge projects to our performance measures. So staff are measured and our teams are measured on that says, hey, these are what we're committing to. So that focused in even on further that we met 90.6% of our delivery. So bragging on the department, I was bragging on the snow and ice, and I'm bragging on development now. So, all right, Daniel, next slide. One thing we've been hearing is, and it's not a surprise, that my project didn't make the list. How do I get the project on the list? We've been clear in conversation that this list gets revisited annually, which reassesses our revenue and the projects that can be completed. For a long time, TDOT and the Highway Fund have been the main source of the funding for a lot of the major projects. We need to start really thinking and begin to change the narrative and ask communities to start thinking of creative ways to achieve the goals. The TDOT will be more of a thought partner on how to achieve that goal, but want to be clear, the Highway Fund will not provide for all the needed projects. Last thing I want to say on this slide is, I remember the methodology. There was one project that in Region 4, the major bridge replacement, that actually is trying to leverage federal grant dollars to support that. That's important as we think through these projects moving forward, is if there are opportunities for these projects for grant dollars to be applied, understand that actually frees up dollars sitting in this plan as well for potential for other projects that maybe candidates to enter back in. So just keep that in mind, is that graphic to the side there. It shows kind of, these are examples. These can help free up dollars shown in that 15 billion we have there. And before I hand it over, one more slide. Region 3 is very close to having the PBMC maintenance contracts underway. We have 2 sections, Region 3 North, Region 3 South. So the blue will be the Davidson County interstates and the interstates north. Red is the remainder. 2 contracts where a firm will come in, actually handle operations and maintenance on these interstates, which actually frees up our own staff on the operations side to tackle our state highways and really make even further connections and relationships with our communities out there. Seeing our guys, the interstates are a big pull for our staff. And so this really frees them up to really focus in on managing our state highway system and continue that effort forward. And so with that, last thing I want to say, the group I mentioned, John, Brad, and myself will be available after the meeting today to have any discussion you want regarding projects in the 10-year plan. I think, Michael, we've got some room back here as well.
Starting route to 1234 6th Avenue North.
Is that how I get there? Is that where I go?
Yes.
But we're,
Vantage Way, then turn right.
there you go. So we're available, we'll be available after, for any discussion you want, and once back here, we'll stick around as long as we need to. So with that, I'm turning it over to I call it the P3 guru, Mr. Brian Lifford here.
That sounds like the music that they play at the Emmys when they want somebody to stop. I'll try to move quickly through just a brief outline of choice lanes. As most of you know, the Transportation Modernization Act enabled public-private partnerships to allow the state to leverage private investment to deal with some of our large infrastructure needs. Lots of states, Tennessee is facing a growing gap between our infrastructure needs and available funding. And other states have taken advantage of this influx of investment. We have learned from some of their victories and some of their I won't call it failures, lessons learned, right? So a choice lane, it's an additional lane. This graphic shows 4 additional lanes, 2 and 2 in each direction. It is in addition to the existing lanes. I think that's important in our messaging to make sure everyone knows we're not taking any existing capacity to build choice lanes. They're funded through a public-private partnership, which is a long-term concession agreement. We see these 30, 40, 50 years, even 60 years. And so it's a long-term relationship with industry that adds capacity, adds choice. And I guess the biggest takeaway that I want you to get from this slide is those general purpose lanes that you see on the top and on the bottom, they experience an increased level of service. So people can stay in the lanes they're in today, not pay a dime, and they'll experience an increased level of service. I think that's huge for our in terms of answering questions about well, what if I don't want to pay? Well, fine, stay in the lane you're in, and you'll move quicker. Next slide, please. This is a slide that is super important to me, and I'm sure it's super important to this group, and that is, what do choice lanes mean for transit? Well, transit will be in these choice lanes, and the reliability of those trip times will result, well, you can see what's happened in other states. 73% more customers in Texas, 4 times ridership within a 5-year period in Florida. And it's all about reliable trip times. And so this, I don't have data to support this, but I think that choice lanes can be the most significant thing to improve transit in metropolitan Nashville ever, incrementally. Next slide, please. So where are we? We're early in a very broad study called a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, a PEL study, which basically tees up the NEPA process in a very large area. What the data is telling us is that the I-24 corridor from Nashville to Murfreesboro is our first choice lane. The PEL study will be the predecessor of the NEPA study that we anticipate kicking off soon. So there's a total of 45 miles of interstate being studied, and this is new to this type of study is new to Tennessee, and it's a vehicle that FHWA gives us to look at a large area and then hone in later on our target area. Not to say the other areas will never be touched. it's just, it lets us incrementally apply NEPA to a larger area. Next slide, please. So here's the I-24. Right now, we're calling it the I-24 Southeast Choice Lanes corridor. The first project will probably not be this entire corridor. It will be some, hopefully large portion of that. We're finding our way as to what the right size of the project will be to make sure that we get the industry response that's needed to have a good competitive procurement. Next slide, please. Our timeline, I guess the focus of this timeline is really on procurement. You see earlier activities where we identified potential projects, potential corridors, industry outreach. What that means is we met with 16 different developer groups who said, we want to be in Tennessee. We want to bring private investment to Tennessee. And really a remarkable response. It shows you that there's some pent up demand for P3 in Tennessee. So the NEPA process is behind us. We'll issue a request for qualifications in early 25, shortlist, and then issue a draft RFP. In this type of procurement, that the difference between the draft RFP and the final RFP is significant because you respond to what industry is telling you, you gather more data as you go, and you refine this process to where when you accept final proposals, you have competition, you have good innovative proposals, and then we anticipate commercial close in the summer of 2026. These are our targets. Next slide. There is no other slide. Any questions?
Any questions for the TDOT folks? Mayor?
Got two, one for each. I think the start of the first part, going from weather into that performance-based management contract situation. We've seen in Nashville, Davidson County on the interstates in particular, holdovers from previous seasons of winter weather on the interstates. When we talk about performance measures, is this going to lead to one, either better paving materials or processes that prevent these years-long rough road situations?
So I believe that's going to be more tailored to our pavement group. So there's a big push. We've just published a 3-year resurfacing program. A lot of that is tied to how do we extend our dollars more and preservation techniques itself. So when it comes to actual materials and what's used, that we have a section out of the region, materials and tests that can evaluate different things through that. Now, when it comes to the contracts, the P3 side, I'm sorry, not P3, PBMC. Now, I think for sure we're receptive as these companies are out there either making patches or doing what they need to do, potentially bringing suggestions to the department and say, hey, we may, because what they're bringing is not just their experience of how to fix things. They're bringing their expertise on what they've learned from other states, because these will be pretty big companies coming in to do this kind of maintenance and these type of contracts. So, but I think in the forefront, our section would receive any ideas or anything from that industry to do the evaluation of, okay, what's the best practices they're seeing in these other states, and maybe they're having similar results with us. But at the end of the day, I think it's more the cost of asphalt and resurfacing is very high. It's getting higher and higher.
I want you to let Rebecca chime in.
If I can, I just want to clarify, when you think PBMC contracts, think day-to-day maintenance, wear and tear activities.
Well, so for instance, I mean, right now, even 2 weeks out, and I know there's a lot of alignment between NDOT and TDOT, but it is our top request right now is Nashville area interstates and highways. And so I want to make sure that on a PBMC basis, there is a performance measure there that talks about both state of repair and rate of repair. And so just for feedback for future, because I know we started with winter weather.
And I don't know the exacts about the metrics of those contracts, but I hear you, and we'll take note. and make sure.
And then on the choice lanes, I know there's been a little bit of discussion. You showed the image. My understanding is, again, where we have HOV lanes, those will continue to exist in addition to the choice lanes. Is that correct?
That's correct. The HOV lanes are 2 hours a day each direction. So in effect, they're general purpose lanes anyway.
I guess
But no, if
with a
there are,
federal representative sitting here too.
no, I mean, no, in effect, 22 hours a day. They're general purpose lanes. They're HOV lanes 2 hours a day. But we don't anticipate touching any of those existing lanes.
I guess what I would say is if they are general purpose lanes and they are not serving an HOV purpose and it is unenforced, should we look at that as an opportunity to make them in effect real general purpose lanes? Or should we look at a strategy to, as we roll out choice lanes, offer enforcement to make them HOV lanes?
I can't speak to enforcement during the 2 hours of the day that they are posted.
So Brian, let me help you out.
Yeah.
So I got Sean with Federal Highways here. It may help me. So when we put them in as HOV lanes, they gave us more money to do that. We can't just wipe them out and say general purpose. There's not even a rulemaking out there that we can do that. We'd have to go back actually to Congress to get that. So they have to stay HOV lane for that 3 hour period in the morning and 3 hour in the afternoon. As we move forward with this, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Through all the developers we have talked to across the nation, as we looked at these choice lanes, they're saying that you're going to have to figure out how to enforce the 3 hours in the morning throughout, whether it's 2 or 3, whether it's with law enforcement, which we all know, if you pull somebody over, you've got a 6 foot inside shoulder. Once you do that, it makes everything worse. So there's technology out there to look at enforcing that. That's not our decision to make right now, but we are looking at how we're going to enforce those lanes. Federal Highway would love nothing more than us enforce that.
I mean, my recommendation would be that as this comes out to community acceptance process, we have some kind of way to articulate that.
And just to piggyback on Mayor O'Connell's comments, currently the regional transportation plan calls for the extension of those HOV lanes in the downtown core, so they're actually effective carpool lanes. So can you speak to any considerations that the work that you're doing to design potential choice lanes will integrate that thinking about an expansion of the carpool lanes to coincide with choice lanes construction?
Again, we're early. And a lot of this process is driven not only by TDOT, but by the innovation that the private sector brings. And so we're really looking forward to how the options that affords us to do exactly what you're talking about or things like that.
And that makes sense to me. So I think we just want to put on the record that we want to be part of those conversations. It's not a foregone conclusion that you're bailing on the other options that to pursue choice lanes, right? Because physically constructing infrastructure in the urban core is going to be difficult and end up potentially precluding other options down the road. So you just want to be part of deciding what those precluded options are going to be in the future. So I appreciate that.
What class of vehicle do you envision? Just class 1 and 2 or all the way up to tractor trailer, or who's going to be using the choice lanes?
No final decisions been made on any of that. Obviously, there are pros and cons for all of that. If you've traveled in other states, you see that larger vehicles pay multiples of the base user fee, which allows for a totally different financial dynamic. But none of those decisions have been made, and it's all part of that kind of that iterative process that we're going through with internally and with the market to understand how do we best serve Tennesseans.
Yeah.
Is there any commitment particularly to transit priority? So, regional buses in the choice lanes? Is that from a policy perspective, or is that just part of that iterative working out the financial model? Can you speak to transit priority within the choice lanes?
We anticipate buses in the choice lanes, if not free, at a very reduced rate. Those types of decisions have not been made, but buses in our choice lanes are a big component, we think, of how this integrates with the transit benefits that was shown on that slide. We wouldn't have shown that slide if we didn't intend to welcome those vehicles into the choice lanes.
Appreciate that.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Do we know at this point how it will affect our existing interchanges and proposed interchanges?
We don't. Again, we're early in the process, but if you look at successful projects in other states, you see where there's been some real innovation as to how the existing lanes and the choice lanes interact with existing interchanges.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Mayor.
Thanks for those great reports. And one takeaway I've got, and I continue to get this at every meeting, is available funding. And I heard your comments that communities need to look for creative ways to achieve those goals. And so kind of my question is, are there tools that you need or cities need from the legislature to be able to implement some of this available funding?
So,
You know, we're excited. We have a lot of T-Dot roads, great. We also have local roads, and we struggle to fund roads that we need. So when we're looking at creative funding, never enough money.
I think it's fair to say that when there's a 30 billion need out there, it's hard to say when's there ever enough money, right? So I think, Mayor, the path forward on that is working alongside our Stacy and our OCT staff to kind of see what that would look like, what tools are needed out there to help, number one, y'all be successful in the targeting either the grants. A lot of that can be filtered through maybe the PO itself and try to figure out how to tackle and get those dollars and apply them to the projects you already seen as a priority or the projects it can leverage within the 10-year plan itself. So I would recommend Stacy and your group and
Yeah, we obviously have to make, a priority of leveraging what else is available, to kind of fill that gap. Just, Sean's used that $30 billion, and then in the statewide partnership program, we recognized there was $2.7 billion in request, and we had 300 million, influxed from the localities that put into that program. So again, obviously there's the need. We've got to work to better develop that process. We realized that process was had a short time period for both us and the localities to enter that program. So that program, and again, being able to find other opportunities the best we can so that we can make our state dollars go further. And so we'll continue to build that with the help of the POs.
Let me add to that. We talked a lot about discretionary grants, and I think the bill of our IJA has a lot of discretionary grants in it, more than any other past transportation bills. What we would ask is you guys, if you looked at grants, for either projects that are already in the plan or projects or grants that bring the majority of the problem. So if you have a $100 million project and you go get a $2 million grant, it doesn't help. So when you're looking at grants, we really need you guys to look at grants that bring the majority of the money or is already one of the projects that are in the plan.
Go ahead, sir.
Good question. I'm playing Steve Bland today, but going back to the choice lanes, I know as you said that you haven't looked at the interchanges and how they're going to interact with that, but as you are encouraging transit use of the choice lanes, I would encourage you to look into opportunities of development of park and rides, especially if there's any excess land that the state has, because it's just going to be an opportunity to make it a lot easier for riders to be able to access that. Acquiring land for park and rides is a big challenge. And sometimes if there's land that is already owned and the state has the ability to incorporate those facilities into this overall development, is going to be a big factor in facilitating that access.
definitely on the radar. Thanks.
Okay, hey, thank you. Anybody else? Brian, you see how important TDOT is at these meetings, and they're gonna be asking a lot more questions, so I encourage you to bring your gang with you, and, you know, just as this thing moves along, there are gonna be some questions, and we appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Anybody got a question? Did I miss somebody? All right, we moved to my report, and all I've got is that remind everybody to nominate committee's meeting, right now, 24 term board officers. That's Mayor Hutto, Mayor Anderson, and Mayor Reed. And, we hold the meeting, the nominations be not March 20th, right, Michael? When whoever, I tell you what, you need to be here if you don't want officer. That's the way it works, I think. All right, we'll move to the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get into really the only piece of information I have with you, you have in your packet the tip status report. Typically, we would have Taylor Lee, our project delivery coordinator, present that to you, but given that we're at the noon o'clock hour, just take a look at that. He's going to stick around just like TDOT will to answer any questions you have about obligation rates. We are behind schedule. We're 31% through the life of our current tip and below that percentage when it comes to obligating money. So take a look at that and see how the funding is breaking out in terms of obligations. I want to thank Taylor for preparing that. I'm sorry to skip through that. The one announcement that we do have, though, we've talked a lot about grant funding opportunities this morning. You heard about the carbon reduction program, which is Congress's investment in greenhouse gas emissions through the DOT. They're also investing through the EPA and the Climate Pollution Reduction Program. If you submitted a project for the DOT CRP, it's going to be eligible for the EPA CPRG. But a lot of other things are going to be eligible too. So any sort of project that will help improve buildings and their efficiencies, which have sort of the added bonus of also increasing the cost for homeowners, which contributes to more discretionary income in the economy. So anything from sort of buildings and industry, transportation, solid waste, there's a broad group of sectors that are going to be eligible for $4.3 billion worth of investment from EPA. So be thinking about your projects and what you might want to apply for by April 1st is the deadline for the application. But what we're trying to promote this morning is that there's actually a March 1st deadline for you to let us know what those projects are going to be, because your projects are going to have to either be in our MSA's climate action plan or the state's climate action plan in order to qualify. So we'll get this sent out via email. Again, it's also available at our website at gnrc.org/CPRG. And we've got staff in the room. You can answer any questions about that if you have any on the way out. I think the last thing I'll say before we wrap up is that this body is scheduled to meet again, if you go to the next slide, on March 20th. But before then, in a couple of weeks, the regional council body will get together and take a look at an annual update to our regional economic development strategy. We'll have updates on our solid waste initiatives. And then there's just a lot of federal money out there that I know we can help you tap into. So we'll have a conversation about those things. We're in budgeting, just like you likely are. And we'll have some information about dues estimates for the coming year. So those are the upcoming meetings. Last thing I'll say is, Sean, you mentioned the year 2025 in the context of NEPA for the choice lanes. And just a personal moment of realization that I'm actually in the future now. The first plan I worked on for the NPO was the 2025 long range transportation plan. So I guess we made it. We're here. Mr. Chair, that's all we got.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for what you and your staff do for us. Sean, you tell Matt we missed him.
We will.
Please. And listen, we had to do 2 months worth of work. That's ready. It's after 12 o'clock. I appreciate everybody's patience and have a safe trip home. With that, I'll take a motion, Mr. Anderson. Got it.
Sure. Good to see you, sir.
Appreciate you joining us. And Vice Mayor, it's a tradition. So you didn't even know that that's how that happened. So